Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather and work is on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. There are no introduction or approval of late items. For adoption of agenda, we have two small changes. We're going to move with unanimous council consent MLA Brennan Day to the first delegation this evening, and we are going to add the letter for the Integrated Mobile Crisis Response Team, CAR 67, to the correspondence so we can discuss this evening.
Second.
So that change has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the delegation change and addition to correspondence? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So if we can get a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So I will invite MLA Brennan Day of Courtney Comox to come up and discuss the letter asking for support for CAR 67 for the Comox Valley. Thank you so much for coming in person, and we may have some questions for you after. And if you just click the mic until it's red, we can hear you online. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here to present today. We're here to talk about mental health crisis response in the Comox Valley. And this is a topic that has touched almost every family, frontline worker, and increasingly having an impact on our local government services. This isn't about choosing between approaches. It's about recognizing that the best systems are not either or, they're both and. I had the unfortunate experience of having to deal quite regularly through my previous role at the Eureka Sports Society with apprehensions and calls to the RCMP and PAC team under the Mental Health Act. Armed and uniformed officers would respond as they are required. It would be up to me, the individual placing the call, to give the officer or dispatcher the relevant background information on the individual to ensure that the response was appropriate and measured. I was in the fortunate position of having that background when I made the call. Most individuals that are calling 911 for mental health issues do not have that background. So I'll put this in a bit of context with the current programs we have. The province recently re-announced the Community Response Crisis Line, CRCL or CIRCLE, as it's being referred to. This was first rolled out or announced in 2023, and this was a rebranding of an existing program called PACT, which was the Peer Assisted Crisis Team. It operates in the Comox Valley and has since 2020, and it's a community-led trauma-informed service that pairs mental health professionals with people who have lived experience to respond to calls for help. The CIRCLE team provides compassionate care, and it does a valuable job, especially when the situation is stable, low risk, and does not require emergency services. It's accessed through a separate phone line, not through 911. And according to the provincial data on that program, because it's in multiple jurisdictions that are RCMP run, including Prince George, 98% of the 8,825 calls they received last year did not require police involvement. So that's a fantastic step in the right direction. But there's a couple things we need to caveat that information with, is that still leaves more than 100 calls where police did ultimately need to be called. Those calls were placed directly to the crisis line as well. In the case of 911 calls, 1 in 5 calls involve mental health issues. From the frontline RCMP officers I've spoken to, several of which are in my caucus, that number is significantly low. That doesn't include domestic assaults where clearly there's raised, people are emotional and they are undergoing a mental health crisis, although they're not previously diagnosed. So that 1 in 5 number is actually underreported. When they do, they're walking into complex, unpredictable mental health situations without proper clinical supports and without, and I'm going to highlight this a couple times here, without access to the patient's healthcare history. So the RCMP effectively go in blind every time they take a call, unless there's something in their records that show that there's been some sort of altercation with the police that mental health was flagged. So I'll give you an example. And we hear of these from time to time here in the Valley, certainly Campbell River and on the North Island. And this is referred to me from my colleague, MLA Eleanor Sturko, who's a former RCMP officer in Surrey. In the event an individual has barricaded themselves in their house and threatened either self-harm or harm to others, in most cases, the RCMP don't have a medical history of that individual. History that, if available, would allow them to shape that response to better de-escalate the situation in partnership with a crisis nurse. So these aren't, unfortunately, uncommon situations. And again, we can probably all remember a few here in the Valley. So we know there's a serious gap between our policing services and our healthcare services in the way that care is delivered, especially as it relates to mental health driven interactions with police. And this is what this program sets out to correct. So the CAR 67 program, as it's referred to, it's called CAR 54 in Nanaimo, or IMCRT, Integrated Mobile Crisis Response Team. They're RCMP cars with formal partnerships between the health authority and the police. They pair plain clothes, specially trained officers with dedicated mental health professionals, either psychiatric nurses or crisis trained nurses. And together they respond to the 911 dispatch or the RCMP non-emergency line to calls involving mental health and behavioral distress. So the advantages to this type of program are that the nurse isn't pulled out of a hospital where coverage is already thin. This is an individually funded healthcare position within that setting, and they're assigned to the CAR team through the health authority. The officer also has advanced training in de-escalation and crisis response, something everybody should have, but this goes one step further. But it also builds that bridge between healthcare and the RCMP or law enforcement. The officer also doesn't show up in a standard uniform. They show up in an unmarked car, and they have a completely different uniform, and they're equipped completely differently when they do ultimately respond. They do not go in with a gun. They have, a hidden baton. While they still may have some non-lethal equipment on them, they certainly don't go in as a standard police officer, which from my experience at the Eureka Clubhouse is a huge issue. There's people that have had altercations with the police historically, and you can spend all the time you want talking to the RCMP in the parking lot, going this individual and giving them background. But the minute a cop shows up in full uniform, it completely changes the way that interaction happens. So that team also has access to medical records through the nurse, and they can see if somebody has a diagnosis, a care plan, or has past interactions that could inform a safer and more effective response. So again, I'll highlight that. That is a huge, huge benefit to this program, is having that medical information when they respond to the calls. So historically, the CAR 67 program was launched in the Lower Mainland, and CAR 67, but it's now rolled out in Burnaby, Victoria, Vancouver, and several other jurisdictions. After 6 years of lobbying, CAR 67 was rolled out in Burnaby, and according to Mayor Mike Hurley, it had an immediate and positive impact on the community. The same has been said for all of the situations where this program has taken effect. Leonard Krogan and Nanaimo, the mayor there, also speaks very highly. Theirs is a little more recent, and they've actually now added an additional officer for, I believe, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage. So these programs can intervene in domestic incidents, conduct risk assessments, and connect people to services. And of course, if necessary, apprehend people under the Mental Health Act. So that's where I'm going to draw back to the limitations of the current Circle program, where they are there in a limited capacity. And if it escalates, the RCMP are called anyways. So it's not a replacement for a CAR 67 program, but it is certainly, if we can keep things RCMP free, all the best, but in many cases, that's not the reality. So currently the Circle program here in the Valley runs from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and on weekends from 10:30 to 5:30. Based on the announcement yesterday, or the re-announcement, the funding in the current provincial budget is not going to be extending that, as we see here. There's also no additional funding in the current year's budget for CAR 67 programs, despite them committing to it. So this is why we're looking to get the ball rolling, because the next budget will be starting to be drafted here over the next few months, certainly over the summer. And I think it's important, if our community wants to get this type of programming, that we advocate now. I'll skip ahead a little bit here. So I guess I'll get to the ask, and then we can ask a few questions. I think that's That's the background that everybody needs to know about why it's important and why this is a bridge program. But what I'm asking today is a motion of support in principle from the town of Comox to bring a CAR 67 or IMCRT program here to the Comox Valley. Currently, we're not asking for municipal funding. What this would entail ultimately would be the funding of an additional RCMP officer. The RCMP here is fully supportive of this. They broached the topic with Courtney, who I'll be meeting with over the next few weeks. I'm going to be talking to Vicky up in Cumberland and making sure that we have as much support as we can to move this forward. There was $3 million committed to these programs in 2023 for program expansion. 2024 saw flat funding from the province, and unfortunately 2024 effectively continued existing funding but didn't see any new increases. So what I'm hoping to see in 2026 is that, based on the data from the other municipalities that show there's a clear correlation of beneficial health outcomes and a reduction on that side of the ledger, that they push forward with that funding through health to support those positions. Yeah, so a show of support from this council would certainly help me advocate to the Ministry of Health and Island Health for the additional resources. It's a long shot to see it happen on a tight timeline, but I feel if we can get all of the municipalities and our nonprofit sector aligned with this goal, I feel there's a very powerful statement to be made to the ministry, and I think we could see a good outcome. So again, I'll just reiterate, this isn't an either or choice with Circle. This is in addition to, and I think this bridges a gap that further aligns healthcare and the RCMP together. And that's a gap, especially in mental health, that is woefully inadequate. They're not talking enough. And while they work together regularly, that coordination could certainly help advance positive outcomes within that system. So thank you very much for your time. If you do have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Emily Day, for putting that out to us and answering some of the questions we had from before. For council, the letter correspondence is on page 7, and we'll be talking about that later this evening. And the sample letter of support is on page 8. So are there any questions for Emily Day? We have Councillor Blacklock.
So my understanding of the CRCL team or the PACT teams was that funding was provincial in nature and announced as an additional $10 million from the Provincial Health Ministry in July 2022, with the program being run here locally by AIDS Vancouver Island or ABI Health Services. Do we have any statistics on use from ABI as to what the response level or the number of instances where they have been called to date?
I only have the provincial data, and last year provincially I believe there's 3 municipalities that are currently under that. There was 8,800 calls roughly for service, and that's to their crisis line. I don't know the statistics.
Because you're absolutely correct in the work that, you know, the limited amount of work that I've done. There is a fear of involving RCMP with some of these marginalized groups, in that there are instances of you know, past heavy-handedness in to use language, their language. My question is if we are going to fund an additional officer for the Comox Valley, and we look at our we're already funding 11 here in Comox with a price per officer that's gone this year up to $285,000 per officer. It really is in our financial best interest to say, well, where are these calls coming from? Right, because it's municipally separated by population, and at 11 officers for Comox, we've always felt around this table, the general consensus has been 11 is enough to police Comox. So, you know, I'm happy to support the letter going to the Provincial Health Ministry, but if it comes to Comox funding additional officers, I don't see room in our budget to be doing that at the present time.
Yeah, so I would say that it would be a split position. Obviously, would be funded by 3 municipalities. We're seeing the share from Cumberland go up also this year. I believe they're hitting the 90% threshold. And I know you guys just did the transition of 70. You guys are at 90 now. That's been brought up with the Solicitor General, and I understand that that's challenging at the municipality. So my argument would be that the ripple on effect to this is keeping people out of an already overcrowded hospital. We've already seen here that the psych ward is completely overtaxed. People that need a couple weeks up there are getting maybe at best 24 hours and then out on conditional supervised release, which is great, but we're already stacking people in there. If we can remove that, it does take a burden off that system. And I know that doesn't help with the local budget here. But if we can make this work and potentially reallocate and talk to the RCMP about what they can do with reallocation of resources from their existing framework, the additional person would actually come out of the health budget in terms of the nurse. The RCMP may already have that position. So this is again early stage, but I feel it's important that we know that the RCMP is on board with this. If we can get health on board with this, then it's just a matter of, okay, where do we, dig around in the couch cushions to reallocate the funding? Because we know it's already getting spent on programs like this, but I don't feel it's actually getting delivered.
I believe we had Councillor Swift. Did you have a question? Nope. Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Hi, Mr. Day. Thanks so much for coming, and professionally and personally, I thank you for advocating for mental health issues. This is super important for our community, and I really appreciate it. I have 3 quick questions, if I can just ask them maybe sequentially. One of the benefits of the Circle and the PAC program is that it's been an evidence-based, data-driven process. It happens all over Canada and North America and other places in the world. And that model works. There's evidence behind it. And as a scientist, I like things that I know already work if we're going to spend money. Do you have any, I know this is kind of a new program. Do you know any other jurisdictions that have used a CAR 67 style model? And if there's any data, and you might not have it on you today, of course, but if you do, that'd be useful to share with council for us to make a decision on this.
Yeah, so certainly I can get you the information from all the lower mainland jurisdictions that have used this now for a number of years. Nanaimo's now, I think, on year 3 of their program with good success. Victoria's also adopted the program. And I'd like to reiterate, it's not an either or. There's a gap here that Circle cannot fill. So Circle cannot respond to any call where there's a threat. So you need to parse the information carefully from the Circle team, because the 8,800 calls that they get, the 100 that needed to be referred to the police were referred from an independent phone line, not from 911. If somebody calls 911 or not emergency, they will try and stream them into the Circle model, right? And direct them to that if they don't feel that there's a immediate threat, either to the person or to the broader public. But if that call gets picked up by 911 and there is a threat, Circle gets circumvented. So those statistics that Circle is reporting on, only 100 didn't get referred. That doesn't take into account all of the 911 data, which I will request from the detachment here. I didn't have enough time to get it for this meeting. But certainly, again, 20% of their calls are mental health related. Those don't get diverted to Circle first. That's not the process that they have if there's a threat to the individual. And we're also putting nursing staff and the Circle teams at risk if we're trying to send them into a situation where they're not able to properly respond because they do not have the authority. So we need to make the distinction between the two. I agree, Circle is absolutely important, and not engaging with the RCMP should be the #1 priority. But in the event people have to engage with the RCMP, we need to make that step as risk-free as possible for both the RCMP and the individual that's expressing distress. And the only way to do that is to give the RCMP some sort of supports where they don't have to just use what they've been taught and what they know. That's not their healthcare is not their primary mandate. Their primary mandate is to keep people safe, right? So by pairing them up with that, they get that information ahead of time. They have a bit of a background on the individual before they start engaging with them from health, and that the outcomes are far better. And the data bears that out. So I'd be happy to send it.
So that's great. And I guess that brings up the second question is, are there any jurisdictions that have both models in place? And if so, how does that work? How does a business owner or a resident know who to call, this line, that line, 911? So, flushing that out, if 2 models existed at the same time in a community, how that would work. And really, I mean, Courtney, council, staff, businesses, residents really are on the front lines of this here locally. So I'm wondering, what the conversations have been with Courtney in terms of this issue, how two would work together. Courtney's really behind the PAC program,
Yeah.
so how that all works together, I don't know if that's been fleshed out, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, the default position of most of the public, and this is an education issue that needs to go on around Pact and Circle, is that there is another option to call if you don't think there's an immediate threat. The general public calls 911 or the non-emergent line to report a, trespass or whatever the case is, right? And we see them concentrated in Courtney, certainly. But the process to then refer that to the Pact team is not clear, right? Nobody's calling 411, for instance, let's use that an example, instead of 911. They default to one, the RCMP responds accordingly, right? If there's a threat. So again, this allows RCMP to triage those calls a little better to go, okay, there's probably a half measure we can take here where we can respond, but respond with the appropriate tools. Right now, they're not in the position to be able to do that.
Anyone else in queue, Mayor?
I believe we may have a question on this side of the table. But nope. Okay, third question.
Okay, sorry, just the last one's about the funding. So that, like Councillor Blacklock, I'm just curious how that would work. So if I understand, it's one additional RCMP officer for the Valley, split between the municipalities.
Correct.
So again, we got a request from the RCMP to fund 2 more officers this year. We just simply couldn't do it with our current tax rates and budget. Funding portion of another officer would be tricky for us. As part of your ask for this letter, is this to ask for funding from the province to pay for the RCMP officer, or is the municipality on the hook for the funding?
Not for the RCMP officer. We're asking the health authority to pay for the psychiatric nurse that would be a full-time equivalent position added. Right now with Circle, that there's no funding for the additional psychiatric crisis nurse. So that's effectively a volunteer peer-led group. This would be direct funding. Right now, if Pact, and it may have changed because there's been some changes since I've had to deal with them. They have to pull psych nurses off of the floor up at the hospital. I'm sure you're aware, in order to respond to these calls. That leaves them short-staffed at the hospital. So effectively, you're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul in terms of being able to deliver mental health care at the hospital because you're pulling people off. This would be an additional position we'd ask for funding for from the province. That's what this letter's for. In terms of how the RCMP allocates their resources and what that requirement would be for the municipalities, that would be up to the RCMP, whether they can reassign officers, get them additional training. But this is certainly more than a full-time job here right now in terms of the mental health crises we're seeing.
Hey, any other questions for Emily Day? Okay, well, thank you. It's encouraging and hopeful to see things being done in a different way and different ways to be advocated for. And we will be discussing this probably in about an hour. So I can follow up with you if you like and give you
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys.
your final answers. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming.
Thanks, well. Enjoy your meeting. Bye-bye.
Okay, I will ask Rachel Ricard for the Director of Land Development for Broad Street Properties to come up and present on RZ 24-3, 2123 Hector. And I believe there's a presentation.
I'm on.
Is it Rachel or Rochelle?
Rachel, please.
Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
No problem. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Mayor Minion said, my name is Rachel Ricard. I'm the Director of Land Development for Broad Street Properties. I know that you guys are familiar with this property, with this project, with High Street's proposals that are adjacent to us. And staff have written several reports and talked about rationale and guidelines, so I'm not going to repeat a bunch of information that you already know. But I did want to come here tonight and talk about our revised proposal and why we made that change, and then answer any questions that you might have. So, and the image on the screen is just here for context. So Glacier Reach Townhomes, what has changed and what hasn't changed? So while it may look significantly different from our previous proposal, the overall intent of the development is essentially the same. We have relocated the townhomes to the southern half of the property. That's changed, and the number of townhomes has increased from 72 to 80 units. Now, what hasn't changed is the asset class. We are still proposing 2 and 3 story townhouse units for sale in a strata development. There are no changes to the required upgrades we have to make to Hector, Aspen Road. There's no changes to the stormwater pond. We will still be dedicating the 10-meter road dedication for the Hector Greenway. And most of the conditions that were in the previous application still apply for this application. So I want to talk about why we made this change. You may or may not be aware, the 2 major reasons that we revised our proposal were the wetlands and the sanitary constraints of the Hudson Trunk. So right now, and what has been ongoing for actually several months, is a conversation about the methodology or the methodologies that are accepted to assess the wetlands. And that's because there is no legislated or regulatory requirements for the wetlands. There's nothing in legislation that says you must have this many meters of buffer or you must use this criteria. There are recommendations and there are guidelines, so that's left a gray area. Just to be clear, there's no debate that there are 2 wetlands on the property and both of those wetlands are protected. So professional biologists or RP bios are qualified to assess wetlands. Right now, there is an individual within the ministry that is challenging the qualifications of the biologist. I can share that it's not just this property. It's not just our biologist. There are other projects in Comox, projects in Courtenay and Campbell River that are having the same challenges with the Ministry of Environment. So it's left things very unclear. And I think that there's enough voices now. So what's happening is there's some conversations happening within the ministry with property owners and property developers that are escalating this within the ministry. And I don't want to get too much into the rabbit hole of what's happening behind the scenes, but I want to illustrate and highlight that this is an evolving situation. And what we're looking for as developers from the province is some definitive and clear and consistent messaging about what we can do, what we can do. So that leaves the wetland and the size of the wetland and the buffer of the wetland subject to change right now. Like I said, there's been uncertainty for months and months and months, and this uncertainty is the reason why we weren't able to start on this project last year. The other reason that we adjusted was the Hudson Trunk sanitary capacity. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. The regional district had a meeting several months ago when I was there, asked about timing. They had said the earliest they thought upgrades could start would be 5 years. That may have changed. I don't know the other conversations that are happening. I know Courtenay and Comox certainly, have a limited ability to influence the decisions of the regional district. So that, that's sort of out of everyone's hands. So we have a theme here, that's uncertainty. And that makes it really difficult for us to make decisions. So, constantly trying to respond to new information. So we just said, okay, let's stop banging our heads against the wall here. What can we do? So we don't know what's going on with the wetlands. So we said, we're just going to err on the side of caution. We're just going to get away from them entirely. So where we're proposing to build, there are no wetlands. The town of Comox has confirmed that we can service the 80 proposed units here. And once we did that, made that pivot, things became unstuck really quickly. You'll notice that the site was cleared earlier this spring. So what's next for us? If you're interested in knowing, we would like to, pending approvals, of course, is start civil works on the property in October, this October-ish. So that would be offsite, stormwater, roads, on-site servicing. We get the civil crews in there, they can maneuver around, they get out. We've got the pond in place for precipitation. We've got sidewalks on the roads for community members. And then, if we have all the approvals in place, we would like to start construction February 1st. That's the target date so far that's been set. And the build out of the property would be in phases. I don't think with the market, we would need to build a phase and wait for the market again. It would be a continuous build. However, with the phasing, residents or people would be able to buy units and live in those units before the full build out of the 80 properties or of the 80 units. So What we're here today, our application is proposing to rezone the entire property as a townhouse zone as opposed to the split zone apartment and townhomes we had last year. The reason that we're proposing that is that we feel that's the simplest path to getting forward to construction. Without, it's premature to try to contemplate what we could build on the property. We're thinking 3 to 5 years maybe for capacity. And in the future, if there's space, if there's capacity, if we want to build apartments, then we have to come back to council with another rezoning application. But essentially the southern portion of the property would be land banked until it's developable. Because at this point, we just don't know what we can do with that. We've been hanging on to this property for 4 years. You may have been listening to us for 4 years. I'd say we're excited to come to Comox, but I will say that excitement is dimmed just a titch over the last 4 years, but we are really looking forward to just getting this started. Fingers crossed, I really think that it can start this year. Comox needs housing options. We want to build, we want to get going on this. So thank you for your time tonight. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Councillor Blacklock.
So for 80 units, are these 2-story townhouses?
2 and 3 story.
2 and 3-story townhouses, each one would have a private garage or?
Correct.
Okay, so what is that phase 1 north side area there, excluding the detention pond?
On the very north with
Yeah.
the trail?
With the 80 units, like what density are we talking units per acre there?
Oh.
Just only because I really do like the 2 and 3 level townhouses over a block apartment building.
Mhm.
And I know that those have been successfully marketed, both in our town, most recently on Anderton and up by Costco in Courtney. But I'm just wondering if 80 over what acreage, how many units per acre is that?
That is about 20 UPA,
Okay,
honestly.
so do you know how that density compares to some of our other townhouse developments in Comox? I remember the last one we looked at beside Quality Foods was more like 11 units per acre. So this is significantly denser than that.
Mhm.
Would there be any way to move that line south a bit?
You mean the property line?
Well, that's a phase line, is it not?
No, well, we would be subdividing this property into
Okay.
2, and so.
So that's what I'm getting at. So if
Yeah.
you're gonna split it into 2 and bank the other one, would there be any appetite to, if indeed the province comes back with a larger wetland area, do you think there would be any appetite to perhaps look at an alternative use for that land? A non-housing use?
So the red dash line that you see,
Mhm.
the northern one there, that is from our best estimates, that would be the maximum size of the wetland. We wouldn't expect it to grow much more than that. So when I say we err on the side of caution, that's sort of the largest area. Earlier, when we were talking to the town, we were considering, and actually it would be our preference to donate that wetland, any area around it, either to the town or to a conservancy group or a stewardship group for sure.
Yeah.
I can't speak on behalf of the owners what we do with the rest, but it could end up just being Fairland Strata, single family lots. Who knows what the
Right.
market will be in.
Okay,
So, yeah.
well, thank you for that. It gives me a clear picture.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks for the presentation and thanks for the revised concept on this. I like this 2 and 3 story townhome concept. I was actually going to ask about land donation because I think it might be a way to maintain the wetlands and the forest that remains for users of the area.
Mhm.
More parkland for our town, which we learned at a recent meeting we're kind of under in terms of our benchmarks. And also give your company a nice tax break as well by donating. So it's kind of a win-win-win.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd really encourage that if there's anything we can do and I can do personally to help move that along. The the land trust here locally is really active and involved in projects just like this. So happy to see that move forward and be a real benefit to the community. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, it looks like that may be all. I just want to say, I know at this table for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been talking about getting doors open for the missing middle. And now the province and the federal government is talking about the same. So it is really nice to see a concept that has some lower density. So it addresses some of the traffic concerns and density concerns. So thank you for bringing the new concept, and we look forward to hearing how it goes. And we appreciate that there has been a lot of uncertainty over the last 4 years, and you guys are still looking at building for next February. So
Yeah.
we will be looking at first reading later this evening.
Okay, thank you. And I forgot to add, I just wanted to say thank you to staff at the town. They have been responsive and, you know, checking in and trying to facilitate development. And it's a refreshing change from when we were here maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So just, you know, to let council know that staff are working to get housing built in town.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. And we will be discussing that later this evening. So our third delegation this evening is Craig Freeman from the Merville Community Association on an update on shake sites. So welcome, Craig, and you have 10 minutes and we may have questions after, or up to 10 minutes. Yeah,
Oh,
there you
we
go.
are. I see the red light. Oh. Okay, so thank you for letting me be a delegation. I'll pretty well read my notes here. The Merville Community Association, MCA, has been working with other interested parties on the Shake Site affair. So, and the town wrote me to ask me what have we been doing. So I just outlining here what we have been doing. So we have a member of our group who is coordinating with the Comox First Nations, and this will involve certain environmental and archaeological reports. We have an estimate for the move from Nickel Brothers Movers, which is about $160,000. We know that the town of Comox supports less construction debris going to landfills. We have permission from the ALC, Agricultural Land Commission, to move the building to the property. The CVRD right now is ready to give us a permit once we put in the application. The ALC was their sticking point. We have started a GoFundMe campaign to assist with the renovation. We have lined up numerous contractors who are interested in working pro bono for the renovation of the building. We have support from groups like Mars, which is just down the road from the Merville Hall. We have support from, of course, the MLHS, the Macklang Heritage Society. And we have sent out an article to the newspaper, The Record, to inform the public and also to help with our fundraising. But that was unfortunately didn't have a very long shelf life. So we are, because the I think the town of Comox got in the way of that one. It was briefly online, but it never came out into the paper. So we're putting together another article on the proposed move of the building to the site so that we can raise awareness of the plan and raise funds so that people know what we're trying to do. We have support from Alana Zablat of BC Heritage. We have support from Lynn Lewis, founder and CEO of Renewal Development, which is a group that are lobbying the relocation of historic buildings as a form of conservation. And we have notified Kristen Clausen of Heritage BC, Genevieve Weber, manager of BC Heritage Programs and Services. Regarding the newspaper article, which I plan to submit to the paper, again, hoping that it will be published. I also plan to share the contents of the article with council before I submit it for publication. And we're hoping the town of Comox will support the contents of the article, as it really is only, or one of the only ways we can get the word out and get people aware of our fundraising program. And other ways to raise funds, because the Merville Community Association is a nonprofit itself. We don't have building funds or anything like that. We just rely on rentals that we get from the building. Plus, we're continuing to renovate the buildings. So the other ways we try to raise funds are by appealing to governments and foundations for grants. Now I have the letter that I was going to submit. I could quickly read it under my 10 minutes if you want me to do that. No takers?
It's within the 10 minutes, if you just
Yeah,
want to do a
yeah,
summary.
I'll just quickly
summary of the
read.
letter.
This is what I'd like to write to the paper, and if you find anything that's wrong with it, you can let me know and I can adjust things, right? Otherwise, I think it should just go through without being blocked. So I've written, after a decade of vacancy and facing imminent demolition, Hamilton Mac Lang's 1950 historic Comox home, known as Shakeside, situated in Mac Lang Nature Park on the edge of the Comox estuary, has finally been offered an opportunity to be saved and to serve a new purpose on the Merville Community Hall grounds. The MCA has offered to adopt the building to its community hall site to sit alongside other previously saved historic buildings, which are the 1915 Stolen Church and the Manse. Once on the site, Shakeside will be renovated to become a much-needed caretaker's residence and a natural history museum. Nickel Brother Movers has proposed moving the building by barge and by truck from the Comox estuary to the hall site. The plan represents the least disruptive relocation process for the communities situated between the two sites. Many volunteers and local companies have already put forward their names as willing to help with professional services, materials, and labor. So you know all this, but this is what I would be writing. Moving Shakeside is a notable environmental win, as saving an existing building diverts the majority of its materials from the landfill. The relocation is a heritage win for the Comox Valley, as the new high visibility location in Merville is very accessible. Plus, this growing collection of historic buildings stands to tell the unique history of this valley while serving the community with usable venues for residents and visitors alike. The proposal would also honor the legacy of Mac Lang, who envisioned his home being partially used as a center or museum for environmental education and research. So now we need your help. This is your chance to contribute to a happy ending for Shakeside by donating what you can towards the building site preparation at the Merville Community Association Hall grounds. Of course, all this requires money, so do let us know if you are available to get involved in any way, and do visit our GoFundMe page, and I have the GoFundMe. And additional information will be posted on the MCA website, which is mervillehall.ca. Shakeside is a Canadian heritage building. It is true that knowledge of our past helps to define us as Canadians, and in times like these, we are proud to be Canadians. So that's the article. Now, I see the moving of the building as being, we have two reasons for doing that. One is to get it out of Comox's site, and the other is to preserve the legacy of Mac Lang. And I did receive a note from Jordan stating that, or within the discussions, that you'd like to get on with this whole process. Otherwise, you'd have to delay it for a year. So it seems that a delay is possible because we don't have funds to immediately move this building. So it's going to take a bit of time. So a delay, or a refiguring of what the timeline is obviously possible. And I have some questions, and I wondered if I could get some answers for these questions. One, questions you may not even want to answer, like how much did it cost to
Greg,
demolish?
just to interrupt you, we ask questions from the delegation.
Oh, okay.
We may be able to answer questions, or you can pose the questions over for
okay.
consideration for our questions too, but we don't do questions from
Oh, I
delegations.
see. Okay.
You can pose them as your thoughts of what we should be considering tonight.
Sure. Okay, so I believe then I am done. That was my presentation to bring you up to date to what we have accomplished. and what we plan to accomplish.
Okay, can you update of the kind of 160 to 180,000 where the GoFundMe is currently sitting at? I didn't have a
Oh,
chance to review.
It's just started a couple thousand. That's it.
I do just want to address the comments that were made about blocking or getting in the way of the fundraising. As the person and staff that deal with media, it was kind of blindsiding, or we were caught off guard with the news article because we would have expected to see it in advance. So I just want to address, we didn't block any fundraising, and communication has to go both ways with the stakeholder. So I
Right.
do want to comment on that. And we are trying to do the right thing, but we're at the last kind of moment here. So we have Councillor Hazlitt.
Thanks very much. Just I guess really a two-part question here. With the exception of the paper and the GoFundMe, how are you planning on raising 160, 170? And then in your opinion here, what's a realistic timeline that you guys are going to be able to make that money up?
Well, I mean, what the Merville Hall, the MCA is proposing, we're offering a site for the building. We're not offering to move the building. We're offering a site to have the building taken out of Comox to solve a problem, because it seems to me that there is a problem. Moving the building would solve that problem of not wanting the building here or facing demolition. And it would solve a problem for us where on the Merville Hall site, we're looking for a caretaker. And we need a dwelling, which would be great. So that solves one of the valley's problems, which is housing. We'd be providing housing through the renovation of the building. We would take care of renovating the building, doing foundation, doing all that work. That's what our GoFundMe is for.
So is the hope that the Merville Association is your hope that the town's going to pay to move it to the site?
Well, that's what we would hope, because we know there is a certain amount of funding that would have been dedicated towards demolishing the building, getting rid of it and doing all that stuff. And there's a trust fund that Matt Lang left, and which has grown over time. So because this is a new situation where we've come in as a party to offer a site for the building, we're hoping that maybe the Attorney General will be able to kind of adjust their ruling, which was try to use, demolish the building and use the funds to build a platform. Maybe that can be changed. If we could deal with the Attorney General and directly let the Attorney General know what our plan is and the benefits of it, maybe maybe things could be changed. The ruling could be, turned over. Okay.
Any other questions from council for Craig? Okay, it'll be later on in our agenda this evening. Thank you for coming and
Sure.
sharing the update.
Okay,
with us.
thank you very much.
Okay, so we're moving on to adoption of minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes for Wednesday, May 7th for adoption. It's been moved and seconded. If we can just use our mics for those online. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have special council meeting minutes for Wednesday, May 14th for adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Just have to check one thing on those minutes. Oh, they're good. All those in favor of the special council meeting minutes for May 14th? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We're now on to page 21, the Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes for Wednesday, May 14th for receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We do have one item that needs to be removed. Number 4 was placed on that list and shouldn't be, so I'll just make an amendment.
Yeah, so
I'll
two
go to staff.
two things on this. I'd encourage council to just receive this for information. We were a little overzealous in putting this on this agenda. This is going to come back to you on June 4th, and I'll just make a note that There was number 4 committee recommendation that was not recommended by the committee. It was defeated. If council moves this for information, we can update the minutes to reflect that change. And then council will deal with this on June 4th with updated information and rates in front of you.
Like, move proceed.
And just to be clear, we can receive it as is with the comment that number 4 was not council recommendation. Okay, any questions or comments on number 1 through 6? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously for receipt. We now have the Nautical Days Festival Committee meeting minutes for Wednesday, March 26, 2025 for receipt.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We now are on page 35, the consent agenda. We have items 1 through 8. If we can get a motion to receive.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of receipt? Opposed? And that passes. And are there any items 1 through 8 that council would like to bring out? We have Councillor Hazlitt.
2, 3, and 4, please.
2, 3, and 4 for discussion on the heritage rhododendrons.
So this has to do with the rhodos and trees going up the Comox Hill. I think we can all agree that they're incredibly beautiful, and I was happy to hear from staff that, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me, that they're being moved to the Public Works yard and then will be going back into the ground, either at the roundabout or along that hill again.
That is correct.
Thank you.
With the over 200 letters, we need more enthusiasm. I'm just kidding. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the heritage rhododendrons on the hill? Okay, are there any other items council would like to pull out of the consent agenda? Okay, we're moving on to page 51, unfinished business. We have the Coalition to End Homelessness Grant and Aid funding. There is a staff recommendation that the contribution of $40,000 be approved through the grant and aid policy to be allocated to the following. There's L'Arche Comox Valley, the Anchorage site preparation for $9,524. Dawn to Dawn Affordable Housing Water Main Repair for $6,667. And the Dawn to Dawn Gakwase Wagalas, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, for $23,809.
Move the recommended.
That's been moved and seconded. And any questions on the recommendation? Councillor Hazlitt.
And this is just clarifying for myself, say with the L'Arche Anchorage site preparation, say that's an $8,000 bill rather than $9,524. What happens with the remaining money? Does it stay with the organizations, come back to us, and goes into our your funding puddle pool? What are we doing?
I'm going to go over through to staff because I believe the coalition handles that funding.
We deliver the funding based on what's been submitted to us. If they were if the cost was less than what they were given, we don't have it written out in policy. This is what I would likely do in that situation. I would find out, well, are you doing any other projects that would meet the grant funding criteria from the town of Comox? And if you are, can you apply it there? If there is nothing that meets council's grant funding criteria, we'd ask for a refund on the amount that was not spent. And we would bring it back to this table. Or perhaps if it's not a large amount of money, I would perhaps liaise with Mayor Minions and look at just distributing the remaining money between the other two projects if they were still underfunded.
Thanks for that answer, COL. Councillor Blacklock.
And I think they've done an excellent job here. The coalition should be commended for taking our guidelines, which is the money should go to capital improvements and capital projects. And, you know, these three projects, the Anchorage site, the Rainbow House, and the affordable water main repair for their house, which I believe is in the town in Comox. Those are all, you know, very good uses of what we had asked for if we're going to be granting money. So I would move acceptance, or will be voting in favor of the 40,000.
Thank you. Yeah, some of our guidelines were capital projects, as Councillor Blacklock alluded to, and programs that are open for residents of Comox, which those three are all available too. So any further questions or comments before we vote on that 40,000 allocation for this year's funding? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And they have updated that the point in time count will be updated for us in the fall. So we'll be able to have that data. We now have unfinished business B, Michael Zavarsky from the CVRD and David Holzer from BCAA. Update on regional electric bike share program. It's actually on the scooter program. Yeah, sorry, I got confused there. So they're adding 3 new zones, which they showed us on a map, and adding in the potential of a 2025 or later scooter program. I will move that we grant that in pilot format program.
Second.
Their request. We have Councillor Blacklock.
Sorry, this is this motion had a citizen in the community reach out to me with respect to a similar program offered for golf carts, electric golf carts. And I said, well, now what are we talking about? Electric scooters, electric bikes, and electric golf carts. But apparently electric golf carts would require a municipal bylaw to reduce speed to 40 kilometers an hour throughout the town. And which, you know, yeah, I'm looking right at you when I said it.
I actually read, I believe it's 30, my first 5 years.
So I think, you know, we're going to continue to see these things come forward as we've talked about around this table. So I'm looking forward to see how the scooter program goes, and I truly hope they will be operated safely by all the people who tried them out. Use those helmets.
Thank you for those comments. I did see a really fast scooter go by and thought it must have been the one that you mentioned. He was going very fast. But hopefully, as he mentioned, these are speed controlled. Any further questions or comments before we vote? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And we will be reaching out to BCAA about using scooters potentially in nautical days. Thank you, Councillor Swift. We're moving on to page 57. We have RZ 24-3, the first hearing for the revised concept at 2123 Hector Road. So there are the 4 points here. We'll go one by one. That first and second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.48 be rescinded.
Move. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that rescission? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We have number 2, that zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.48 be amended to A, rezone the entire subject property to RM 7.1 zone townhouse, as opposed to split zone RM 7.1 and RM 6.1, and B, delete sections that become redundant after Comox zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.46 was adopted.
Move. Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions on A and B? Councillor Kerr.
Just a question for staff. Earlier we were talking about perhaps a donation of the undevelopable wetland area. Is that something that the town could include as part of the zoning application or requirements for zoning? That the undevelopable wetlands be donated to the town or another land trust?
Over to CEO Wald or Director Houle.
No, I'll pass it over to Director Houle.
Through the chair to Councillor Kerr, that is something at the time of rezoning would, if that's council's wishes, to include that as a condition that hasn't been talked about with the applicant. So I would recommend perhaps if that wants to be the direction of council, to refer it back to staff to have those discussions with the applicant, but it hasn't been discussed at this time, forming a condition of the zoning.
We have Councillor Grant.
Yeah, thanks. So what would the implications be of that? If we were to take that, would there be any drainage work we'd have to do? Would there be any would we be taking on any kind of burden, or would we be getting rid of a burden, or? I'm just not sure what that would entail, right?
Over to CAO Wall and possibly different.
Yeah, we wouldn't know at this time. And as the development goes in, I think you'd expect to see changes in the hydrology that may require additional care or attention into the future. If the town takes it, it would be the town's property and we would bring it into our park system and maintain it the same way we do our other passive parks. And if it starts to run into health concerns, then I would imagine that staff would be coming to council and looking for capital funds to make improvements to it.
And if it were to go to, say, a land conservancy, who would then look after it? Should any of those things occur?
The Conservancy hopefully would. I think that too depends on the cost of what's required. They may approach the town, but it wouldn't be the town's property. We'd have to look into this, but I don't think there are any maintenance obligations by the town to maintain the functioning of a wetland. If it's stopped working or stopped functioning the way that it is now, I do not believe if the town owned it, we would be under any regulatory obligations to make improvements. But if this is something that council wants to do, I think the advice from Director Houle to direct us to staff and have conversations with the applicant and bring back a staff report on the implications would be a good place to start.
Thanks.
Councillor Kerr.
So we have a motion on the floor, a point two. And I personally don't want to slow down development of this project. Could those discussions happen like between now and our next council meeting, and then we make a decision, let's say on the 4th?
I believe so. I don't think any of the changes here would restrict us from moving from first to second, would it?
Through the chair to Councillor Kerr, I would recommend doing just first and second reading potentially, if that was the direction council wished to go.
Thank you. So it looks like we're probably okay on number 2, and then on number 3, when we're doing first, second, and third reading, we could look at doing first and second, depending on the will of council. Councillor Kerr.
So just another process question. So if I were to make a motion, then we pass number 2, pass first and second reading, and then I could make a motion that staff, which may or may not have support of council, but I could make a motion that that staff have a conversation with the developer before third reading on the implications of and possible donation of land prior to third reading.
When we get to number 3, I think you could just put that all as
Yeah,
one, if
okay.
that's
Just what I know process.
other motions. And so we are on number 2 at the moment. Councillor Blacklock.
Should we not be waiting until the province works out the delineation of the wetland itself? Because apparently in the history of biology, this is the hardest wetland to delineate in the entire province. So like, why would we then commit to hamstringing it today or on June 4th when we can wait and see where the wetland actually extends to in the north line, and then then at that point we'll have a line for subdivision? Like, is it first and second reading today and wait for the province to answer, or is it first and second and third readings today and we go forward with this line as drawn?
I'll go over to CAO Wall, but I think that the thought would be if this is something we're wanting to have, it would be good to start the conversation now so the developer is aware that that's one of the more important things for council to consider if it hasn't been mentioned before. CAO Wall.
So 2 different avenues to think about here. So I'll start with the wetland delineation. The delineation that's been provided by Broad Street is based on the required methodology by the provincial government. I think it is very unlikely at this point that you are going to see, or council is going to see, a expansion of the wetland buffers into the areas that are proposed for development by Broad Street. The decision-making and protection authority lies with the provincial government on the wetlands. However, council can do what you've suggested, which is to wait. But I don't think that Broad Street is looking to have conversations with the province that would potentially expand the wetlands into their developable area. I believe the conversations are as well. I don't believe the conversations that are being had with the province are around the potential that the wetland will expand beyond what is shown here into the developable areas. The conversations that are being had with the province are ones that would reduce it. So I don't think that is a risk that the wetlands are going to grow in size into the proposed developable areas is what I'm saying. So if that's the concern, although council can certainly take a very, very safe route and wait for this conversation to be done, but that could be a long time from now. So that is answering the sort of process on the wetlands, which would be, you can continue to third reading on this meeting. When it comes to the concerns around potential donation of the undevelopable land, the advice from Director Houle would be to go to second reading, then have the discussion whether or not you want to ask for the undevelopable land to be donated to the town. And if that is passed, we'll hold off on third reading. We'll have the discussions with the developers and we'll come back. If that's defeated, then you can move forward to third reading.
Just as a follow-up, then, isn't a requirement of a 2-lot subdivision to take 5% of the land value in lieu of park?
We have, there'll be a number of contributions, DCCs, ACCs, parking, all of those will be part of what's happening.
Thank you for answering those questions, Director Houle and CEO Wall. So we are on number 2, and it sounds like through staff, we would address at number 3 if we want to send over some considerations to the developer between second and third reading. So on number 2, are there any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We're now on number 3, that zoning amendment bylaw number 1850.48 be given first, second, and third readings as amended. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion? We have Councillor Kerr.
I make a motion that we give first and second reading as amended. A vote.
Did you want the portion about? We can combine that now.
We can it be combined as one? So, okay, first and second reading subject. No, I thought we were going to pass first and second reading and then have.
My apologies. Okay, so first and second reading and third has been left off just for clarity for council. Any questions or comments on passing first and second reading as amended? Councillor Grant.
No, I'm voting.
I saw your hand up. Can't read your mind. No questions or comments. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And Councillor Kerr.
I'll take a stab at a motion, and I know that our crack staff will fix it for me if I get the wording wrong. So motion to direct town staff to have a discussion with the developer prior to third reading to discuss potential donation of land that includes the 2 wetlands. On the southern portion of the property.
Call for comment on that motion.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think your language originally was the best, is to discuss with the developer the potential for donation of the undevelopable land on the parcel.
Perfect. It sounds better when you say it.
With a report to come back to council prior to third reading.
Thank you, CEO Wall. Okay, so we have a councillor, we don't have a seconder before discussion.
I'll
So
second that.
seconded, and then we have Councillor Swift.
So for sending us for discussion, will it come back to our June 4th meeting?
I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, I can't. I can say that staff will make the effort, and I suspect that the developer will make the effort to have that conversation as well. So I would imagine we can get it back for the next meeting.
Thank you for asking. I know none of us want to hold this up any longer. Any other questions or comments? So we're doing first and second reading and a discussion with the developer on the undevelopable land. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. And just for clarity, number 4. I believe we would not pass as that's after third reading.
You don't
For
have to take up,
clarity.
yeah, you don't even have to take the motion up. If council's done, you can move on.
Okay, so number 4, we will leave until after third reading. I just want to make 100% sure 4 is to be left. Okay, thank you. There are no special reports. We're on page 79. We have fees and charges amendment bylaw 2016.08 advertising in parks. That the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2016.08 be adopted.
Move.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. On page 80, under new business, we have the drafted 2024 annual report. That the annual report as attached. Report from communication coordinator titled Adoption of the Annual Report be received, and further that the annual report be available for public inspection as per section 98(1)B of the community charter.
Move.
That's been moved and seconded.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the annual report? I just want to say thank you to Corinne for providing that draft. It's I think 55 pages, and there was lots of pictures in there, which I know council had asked for in past, just to show some of the projects and events that happened over the year. So thank you for taking those comments and including that into the report. There's lots of great imagery in there, so thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. On page 135, we have a budget amendment for the Comox roundabout at Rodello, that the 2025 budget be amended to move the capital project Comox roundabout Rodello project from 2026 to 2025.
Move. Second.
Moved and seconded, but we have a comment from CAO Wall.
Yeah, this won't have impact the recommendation to amend the budget. We were really excited to find out that they are ahead of schedule, and it looked like they would be able to construct both roundabouts this year. We found out today that might not be the case, but that there doesn't change the recommendation. Let's make that budget amendment, and then if it doesn't get constructed, it just gets pushed into carryover for next year. So it might happen, it might not. We're standing by.
Little uncertainty there, but it'll be pushed forward in case. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are on page 137, development permit 24-6 for 2025 Mackenzie Avenue. That permit development variance permit 24-6 be approved, and further that the administration be directed to issue the permit.
Move.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments for 2025 Mackenzie Avenue? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We are on page 160 under new leases for 129 Port Augusta Street, the Marine Service Building. That number 1, that the proposed lease agreement with Big Animal Encounters Limited for the premises located at Unit 102 during the term August 1st, 2023 to July 31st, 2026, as attached in the May 21st, 2025 report from the Director of Corporate Services titled New Leases be approved, and further that the Comox Mayor and Corporate Officer be authorized to execute the agreement.
Move. Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. The second lease is on the Surf Sup Inc. DBA Compass Adventure for the premises located at Unit 104 and 105, including a storage building and dryland compound during the term February 1st, 2024 to January 31st, 2027, as attached to the May 21st report from the Director of Corporate Services, be approved, and further that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the agreement.
Move. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that lease? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We are now on page 208 for a parklet license for Hangar 31 Enterprises, Inc., which is up at 2310 Guthrie and McDonald on the corner. That the road encroachment license agreement for Hangar 31 Enterprise, Inc. for a portion of the highway located at the corner of Guthrie and McDonald Road during the term January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2029, as attached to the May 21st, 2025 report from the corporate officer titled Parklet License Hangar 31 Enterprises, Inc. be approved, and further that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the agreement.
Move.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the parklet license? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We are on page 211, Shakeside's viewing platform, next steps. There is a recommendation that council direct administration to proceed with the construction of the Mackling viewing platform in 2025 on page 211. And there also is alternatives to the recommendation. CAO Wall is going to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Just to let council know where we are at a decision point where we either need to move forward with the construction of this viewing platform this year. Any further delays just means it won't be able to be constructed prior to the end of this year at this point. Just for clarification on where we're at. So the change, the town has that building as part of a trust. In order to make a change to the trust, the town had to make a application to vary the trust to the court. The Attorney General's office supported the town's application. The Attorney General's office is still involved in this process in ensuring that we follow through on what the court has ordered. I do not believe that conversing with the Attorney General's office to see a change on this is the step that we'd have to take. If council wants to make a fundamental change to this project, it is likely another application to the court to vary the trust, and we would be starting that court process again. What is clear out of the court order that we have right now is we are required to construct a viewing platform along the general conditions that are outlined in this report, and that the funds in the trust can be used for that. The Attorney General's office has made it very clear that the town cannot use the trust funds in order to move the building and have it set up in another location. So if that is something council wants to pursue, it's not conversation with the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office is likely not to converse, it will likely not converse with the Merville Community Association because they are the lawyers for the provincial government. They speak to our lawyers. The Attorney General's office does not speak to me. They speak to our lawyer who's on the file. So going down the road where council would be able to use monies from the trust to relocate the building rather than to construct the viewing platform, in all likelihood, you're looking at another court application to have that considered, and the courts will decide whether or not that's a acceptable use of the funds.
Okay, thanks for those comments. I don't believe we have a motion on the floor.
I would move the recommendation.
We have Councillor Grant moving the recommendation, and it's been seconded. So now we can open for discussion. I believe we have Councillor Kerr.
I know the discussions, with archaeology at the province around the Midden and the sensitivity of that area were like a factor that caused some of the delay in us getting to this point. Do we have any understanding of how KFN or, archaeologists at the province would view would view the movement of that building through the Midden? Is that like a non-starter, or is that something that would be possible?
I'll just go over to CAO Wall.
It's from the information that we have right now, it does appear that it would be possible, but we do not have any indication from the province or from KFN as to what the impacts on this would be. So there's a significant process. If there's going to be significant change in what's going to happen here, there's a significant process we're going to have to go through.
I just want to say, I think that's been going on for decades, and it's unfortunately just too late, and we need to move along. And I really believe that we need to honor the legacy in whatever way we can through scholarships and the museum and things like that. But it feels like this is too big of a shot in the dark, and we need to move forward with our plans. So that's my position on it. But we have Councillor Grant.
Yeah, it sounded like Mr. Freeman was expecting us to move the building. And of course, at $170,000, that's all of a 2% tax increase for next year on top of all the others. And we just had a basically 9% tax increase. I don't think we're in a position to be able to do that again next year. And so it sounds like they're a long ways away from being able to go. And it's unfortunate to me that they didn't show up 2 or 3 years ago with this concept. We might have been able to work with it, but they basically came about 4 months in advance. And there's just no time to make the change at this point, I don't think. So that's why I made the recommendation.
I'll just look around for any first-time speakers. We have Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I agree completely with Councillor Grant. And if you look at, page 215 of the agenda tonight and the sketch of what the viewing platform is going to look like, it's a really beautiful viewing platform that actually honors the house and the frame of the house right now. I live in that neighborhood. I walk by this house every day with my dog, and it is falling down and falling apart. And I think replacing that with a viewing platform honoring MacLean's legacy, honoring everything we have in the museum that honors his legacy, and providing another amenity to the community, I think that's amazing. And especially that we're not going to harm the Midden or the environment in doing this, I think is a bonus. So I think it's time. It's just too late. We're out of time and out of money. It's time to make this happen. Thanks.
Agreed. These aren't easy decisions to make, but it's kind of black and white on the finances and the timing here. So thank you to everyone that got us to the decision point. And there is a recommendation on the table to proceed with the construction of the Mackling viewing platform in 2025. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. We have no notices of motion. Under correspondence on page 7 and 8, we've added MLA Day's letter to support in principle the program of CAR 67, which would be a letter going to Minister of Health, which is Minister Osborne. So that is under correspondence. Would anyone like to make a motion, or we can just receive the correspondence?
I would move that we send the letter off to the appropriate departments.
As stated on page 8, the
Yeah.
letter
Sorry.
okay, from Tana Comox. That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments for supporting the letter in principle? Councillor Kerr.
Just curious, maybe this is a question for you, Mayor. Again, Courtney's at the front line of this. I feel like we're on the periphery. I feel like I don't have enough information to make a decision on this program because I don't know the evidence of how it's working in other jurisdictions, nor the cost implications. So maybe the question to you is have you had any conversations with Mayor Wells or others at the leadership table, and is there support of this generally, or is this something that if we supported it, we'd be alone on it or partnering with others? I'm just not sure how this is being viewed by other municipalities. Thanks.
I've spoken to some organizations. We spoke to the RCMP about it, spoke to Cumberland about it. The mayor has been away in Courtney for a couple of weeks, and they're speaking to them next. So unfortunately, we are making the decision kind of as one municipality versus both. So that's something our council will have to consider. The RCMP is very supportive of trying to get this. Of course, that's a resource consideration for them as they are looking for more officers. So it is something that we do not know the council's official position on going into this. And Councillor Grant.
Yeah, I would think that if they're bringing this to the Comox Valley, if one of the 3 communities didn't want to be involved, that it would probably end the process. So I think there's all sorts of time involved here that we can use. If Courtney is vehemently opposed to this, then we could certainly retract our letter if we had to. So I think it's important that we pass it tonight, show our support, and if things come up later, we can always change them.
Any other questions or comments in regards to the letter in principle for the CAR 67 program? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So we will send that off and I will note to talk to Mayor Wells or Acting Mayor Hillian to let them know where we're at with the sending of letter in principle. We have no late items. We will do a quick round of reports from council, not things we've attended, but if you had any updates from the CVRD or any of your liaison boards, we'll go to Councillor Blacklock and then Swift and Haslett.
Just a quick reminder for everyone coming up on June 3rd, there will be a business luncheon designed for business owners and those who work in downtown Courtenay and downtown Comox businesses. It's going to be a conversation held at Crown Isle. There is a press release going out tomorrow, so if you're interested in attending this public luncheon, there is going to be a speaker panel including the former BC Coroner, local business owner, John Hedican and Greg Heminger from Tailgate Toolkit, as well as Dr. Charmaine Enns, our public health officer for the island. And the topic is around the toxic drug crisis and the confusing and sometimes contradictory messages in the media and in the public discourse that amplify the issue. Just so we're all clear, the data is very conclusive. In BC, this crisis is the leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 59 years of age, accounting for more than all the homicides, suicides, accidents, and natural causes combined. So it's obviously an ongoing and very challenging issue. And it's one that I think attending this event at Crown Isle on June 3rd would open a lot of people's eyes to the real solutions that may be out there, because we know that one death is too many. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Blacklock. We have Councillor Swift.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett.
Knuckle Days meeting next Wednesday, council chambers from 4 till 5:30.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Grant.
Just a quick thank you to the BIA for inviting council to attend their excellent AGM and speaker presentations. And I just wanted to mention to all local businesses, please sign up to support the trolley. I'm really hopeful that we get the trolley for the summer for tourists and residents to tour our beautiful town. Thanks.
Yeah, so I attended the Rec Commission meeting, Water Commission, and the RD meeting. Nothing happened at the water, so we don't have to talk about that. But at the Rec, we talked about Arena 3, the new rink. They're currently putting together a business study to see if a rink with seating around it of about 1,500 seats makes sense or not. There seems to be a lot of it could actually work really well. The only problem is the cost is quite expensive. So they're going to get back to us on that. I did ask them when they were doing that, if when they do build it, if they could at least leave enough room on the sides to add seating later if we couldn't afford it now. So anyway, they're going to look into that. And at the RD meeting, we actually applied for 2 grants for emergency preparedness. So one for 200,000 and one for 150. So there you go.
Great. Thanks for those CVRD updates. Councillor Kerr mentioned a couple of the ones, so thank you for that. And we had the RCMP awards yesterday in Marina Park. Thanks to Councillor Swift for attending that. And they gave out 6 King Charles III coronation medals, which was a really nice thing to watch. They hadn't held those awards for quite some time, and they were really happy to be at the town of Comox. And represented Comox with the Comox Fire Department on the Victoria Days May Day parade and ceremony on Monday. And that was a really great event. So thanks to Cumberland and the Empire Festival Society, I believe that's the right name, for hosting a 3-day really fun weekend. There are no media questions. Are there any questions from the public? Come on up. And you'll just have to make sure the mic is red so we can hear you. Thank you. If you just don't mind stating your name.
Sure. Yvette Crane. I live here in Comox at 2250 Manor Place. I always like to start by saying I take a moment to really appreciate being able to address my elected officials, especially in these days and times. It's nice we can have such civil discourse. My question is around the roundabout development. I was totally taken by surprise when I heard the sound of chainsaws across from my house the last 2 days. And I understand from what I heard tonight, you received lots of letters. So I guess I have a few questions, but I'll make it into one. Are we really looking hard for alternative solutions to clearing trees? That is, I imagine there were other ideas brought forward about how you could preserve more of those big trees that are on those corners. Were any of them looked at the time, or do you know now of potential ways of working around that kind of landscape in an innovative way? Since I've lived here for 3 years, I just feel like we're always in a big hurry to clear and do what we want to do. So I guess that's my one question, if I get one. Thank you.
Thank you. I may pass this over to staff, but I will say, I believe the roundabout was approved probably back in about 2021. I don't know the logistics around how trees could be maintained, but I think with road work and roadways, it's quite challenging. So the response from staff on the rhododendrons in the garden was that they were a really beautiful part of town, and they would do everything they could to have those planted back, where the trees with the roundabout, I believe, were pretty unavoidable. And communication was done over the years about the roundabouts, but the trees that were going to be coming down were part of that necessary infrastructure. But I don't know if staff has anything to add to that or not.
Maybe I'll ask Director Ashfield to comment.
I don't really have much. I think the mayor kind of summarized it pretty good. That roundabout at Rodello or Glacier View was in our books for a number of years for our transportation study. We had a much larger footprint and we looked at reducing it, and we kind of putting in sort of a dog bone style of it. This is for the first phase of it, so it was much larger. So we did change that design, but unfortunately, some trees have to come down early. Right away. There's not much that we can do, but we do carefully consider that and try to design around them and ensure that we can save them when we can. For sure.
Thank you for the question and for attending. Okay, we have no resolutions to go in camera, no rise in report, so I will move for termination at 6:32.
Sorry.
All those in favor? Perfect. Thank you for attending and to senior leadership this evening.